The perfect Christian character is attainable. And what did Jude 1:24 tell us? Do we recall?
He's able to keep us from falling and to present us faultless before the Lord.
God is able. So if God is able, all that we have to do is submit ourselves to him, isn't it? So beautiful. God is able to keep us from falling. Now, that point of keeping us from falling is, what kind of falling is he able to keep us from? Is it the falling that we have to fall sometimes and rise again? Is that the one he can? No, he permits us to fall sometimes. But the fall that he's talking about is the fall which is the entire fall. Right? King David fell, but he rose again. And that's the issue here. God is able to keep us from falling totally. That's what the promise is. That's what we've got to remember. And because we are going to be prevented from falling in this work of character building, what do we need? Because we sometimes fall. We've got to rise again. We fall and we rise again. What characteristic need we to develop? What was that? Persistence or patience. Patience. This is so important that we understand the principle of patience, because what does it say in James 1 verse 4? What does it say about patience?
Patience makes a perfect work.
Yes.
Is that part of that text?
Yes, that you may be. Let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Huh? So God says he's going to get you there, but in the process of getting you there, as we heard from the testimony, we go through trials, and be patient with the trials. And if you fail, rise again. Don't give up. Don't be impatient. Don't be impatient with the process or with the progress. We always want to see progress, but we don't always see it because it's unconscious to ourselves that we are changing. These are all important principles to bear in mind. So that's encouragement in itself. But to help you to be patient and not to give up, there was something very important and very special in the note under question 2, and also in the note under question 6. Did you? I suppose some of you haven't got your lessons with you from last week. In these two notes, it said there, do not speak of trials and discouragements.
That's precious.
Look away from these to Christ. Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. Do not disappoint the one who gave his life, that you might be an overcomer. So, isn't it just exactly what we need? We look at our own situations and we take our eyes off Jesus. And then we lament about, oh dear, I'm so unworthy and so on. And we don't, and I was just saying to somebody this week, if you see how sinful you are, you should rejoice. Looked at me and what? I'm seeing what a hopeless case I am. I should rejoice. Why should I rejoice? Because that's what Jesus died for. And if I accept what he died for, well then I'm going to be recovered every time. I'm going to restore myself out of this deplorable hopelessness that wants to get hold of me. these are such important things to take into consideration.
There's a really important point to add to that, that Spirit Prophet says that the more we talk about trials, the more trials we will have.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
he wants more.
We're paying attention to the trials instead of Jesus.
Ah.
That's the danger. And then the other quote was, Christ is our model, but unless we behold him, unless we contemplate his character, what is that? We are to contemplate his character. We shall not reflect his character in our practical life. Now, this is the principle, that we reflect upon something by beholding his glory, his character, we will be changed. If I'm looking at my negatives, I won't be changed. That's the reality. And so God said, look to me and you will be changed and you will become perfect. The result is that here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. All right. Is it all set now? Very good.
I don't know about the audio.
So now what we want to do is go into our new lesson. And there is something in this new lesson. That's right. Here we go. There is something in this new lesson that directly connects us with our study that we've had over the last 6 months. We've had a character study that if we're going to be the faithful people in the last generation, it's directly connected with our character. We'll see as we proceed where that little connection is. So we are doing something here as we are looking through the objectives. We're examining the words of Jesus, because did you see the title of this was The Last Generation? To examine the words of Jesus to ascertain the generation he is referring to. Right? Matthew 24:34, I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. What generation is that? We're examining the words of Jesus, so we ascertain the generation he is referring to, and then to observe the relevance of Christ's discourse to the generations just prior to this generation that will not pass. And finally, to identify the time period that embraces the generations Jesus envisages in his discourse. So you can see what we're studying here is the careful understanding of what Jesus was meaning. That's what our study is. Many times we hear all sorts of teachings and it's different to what Jesus means. We've got to try and understand what Jesus means. So, let's go to question 1 then. What events does Jesus point to as the signs that herald his second advent? So, the second advent that he says what's going to happen to identify when those last day events are going to take place that herald his second advent. What were they? If you study this carefully, what were they?
There was earthquakes and there was darkening of the sun and blood moon and there were signs in nature.
And the falling of the stars. Now, you saw it there in the note. It went into quite a lot of detail. We can see very clearly that before 1844, what happened? The earthquake, 1755, the Great Lisbon earthquake. That's what was plainly told us there in Matthew, Mark, and Revelation. And then
1798.
Yes.
When the sun was to be darkened.
Right. That was in 1798. A quarter of a century earlier persecution that almost totally ceased. Following this persecution, according to the words of Christ, the sun was to be darkened on the 19th of May 1780. This prophecy was fulfilled. And then
1833, and the stars shall fall from heaven.
there we go. And these are the events that Jesus said will happen immediately after the tribulation of what days? Remember the tribulation of the 1,260 years. Immediately, this is a very important little statement. These were happening before 1844 because persecution began to diminish under Martin Luther and the Reformation. And so the tribulation stopped before 1844, and immediately there were the signs. Now, that's an important little clarification. Is that clear?
So was the only signs that were going to happen before it? Because this is after 1844.
These signs were before 1844. The important point of this question is that we identify the beginning of the harvest. Immediately after these terrible tribulations of the Dark Ages, these signs were telling us, now you've got to get ready for Jesus to come. Can you see what the importance of that study is? Right? So we're getting a very clear indication that according to the words of Jesus, the people who were seeing these signs, the great earthquake, everybody knew about it, the Lisbon earthquake, and then, wow, this dark day, and as it was described there, that was so noteworthy. People realized something special was happening here. And then the falling of the stars. I mean, you've seen a few falling stars, but this was just one. The whole sky was full of falling stars. Right? So these were the warnings that God said, now it's coming. 1844 is coming. See the point? So, and then we come to question 2. How does Jesus connect the signs with the last generation? Now, when you read Matthew 24, 32 to 34, now we follow carefully now so that you can see what Jesus is trying to get across. He says, what in verses 32 to 34?
Sorry, John, can I have a question?
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's what class is for.
Just I don't really get this one. 1,200, I'm so sorry. 1,260 years was the long period of trial for the church.
Yeah, the Dark Ages.
Yes. So is this overlapping the earthquake, the darkened sun, and the fallen stars? Because if everything finished on the 1844,
That's right.
it means also 1,260 years
Yes,
also finished.
they finished then, yes.
But also overlapping.
But Jesus said immediately, that's what I emphasized, that immediately after the tribulation, immediately, the tribulation was shortened.
Yeah.
That's the point. See, Martin Luther and the Protestants arose, and slowly the persecution was not anymore so bad anymore, and then it basically stopped before 1844. And that's why he said immediately, so that immediately after that, 1755, 1798, and then 1833. This was the signs that would happen, so that you know that the coming of the harvest time, of the closing of this world's history, starts in 1844. He says, here is the warning. That clear to you?
Yes, now, thank you.
Very good. Yeah, and it's important that you know, don't let me rush on without you understanding what we're going through here, because this is very essential. So there now, Jesus is speaking in Matthew 24, verse 32 to 34, about the language here. Let's really read that out aloud, somebody please. Matthew 24, 32 to 34.
Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled.
Okay, so he's just given a whole heap of prophetic descriptions, and now he points to the arrival of the harvest, the fig tree shooting, all the trees producing new leaves and then producing fruit and so on. He's pointing this out, and so as you see this taking place, and then in Luke 21, 29 to 32, it's interesting that he doesn't just say the shooting of the fig tree, it also says, and other nations shooting. Now that's what Jesus is connecting the signs with the last generation, because in verse 34 he says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Have you ever been puzzled with those words? Yeah. What generation, he says? What's he meaning here? This generation shall not pass until all these things be fulfilled. Now, some people think that got all sorts of contortions here. That they think he's talking about the generation of the apostles, and it's false. He's talking about the generation that sees all these things fulfilling, and he's just been talking about the fig tree shooting and all the other trees shooting. Now let's follow this through very carefully now. Now go to question 3. Is there more to this parable than the mere signs of nature in the sprouting trees in spring? Many people just see this as a sort of a hazy representation of, you know, in nature, you know that summer is near when the trees begin to shoot. That is true, but what was he specifically meaning? Because he said, this generation shall not pass.
To me, it talks about what I kind of get from it, and a bit of thinking. To me, it talks about our relationship with God. If you read it, you know, the master comes and says, cut this down, it's produced no tree, it's produced no fruit, cut it down. And the servant says, no, let me give it another year. So it's, to me, just, you know, we have to bear the fruit of our conversion. Our conversion is supposed to be fruit.
That is a good observation.
This is, to me, if we don't feed on the Word of God, because when you look at Ezekiel 31:7, I know it says 8 and 9, but I look at 7, and it talks about the street that was one of the great waters. So unless we feed, so yes, we do have the signs that show us that His coming is near, but that's for a reason. It's for a reason for us to then look at us and say, am I prepared? Because He can come at any time, so am I truly prepared? It's a warning so that we know that it's near, but it's also an encouragement that we need to get our relationship with God right.
That's very, very true. I'm still looking for what Jesus actually meant, really. You know, we can draw all sorts of observations which may have a lot of value to it, but the sharpness of what Jesus meant is what we're after, sister.
He was talking about the Jewish nation and how they were going to become
Right. Now, what we read here is he says the tree, the fig tree, and the other trees, when they shoot. Let's carefully examine that there is a parable in Luke chapter 13, verse 6 to 9. There is a parable that Jesus gave there. Brother Darrell?
In 1948, Israel became its own recognised nation in Palestine. The reality of what happened years beforehand, with all the Jews after the Second World War returning to Palestine, and then in 48 they established themselves as a nation, and that is the fig tree.
Right. This is the point, because there was a parable of the fig tree in Luke chapter 13, which tells you what did God mean by the fig tree in the parable. What did he mean? Straight from the words of Jesus there.
Yeah, but then, I know that Palestine, that they became a nation.
Yeah, but we're running ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, but they rejected God long before that, so how can they be?
We're running ahead of ourselves. We're looking at Luke 13, 6 to 9. What does God identify? What nation does God identify with the fig tree? Right? So are we clear on that? The Jews were the fig tree, correct? Okay. And this was repeated again in Ezekiel, that there are other trees as well which were identified as nations. Like, for instance, the cedar, the Assyrian. Right? So all the trees in symbol represent nations. And one nation that is represented as Israel is the fig tree. Right? Now, having consolidated that, let's just look over to let Sister White clarify that on the top of page 4. The Jewish nation was represented as the fig tree, which God had planted in his vineyard. You got it there? Plain as that. And what was meant with cut it down, and he said, no, let it sit for a little while longer. What was that referring to? Before they were cut down, Jesus was given, yeah?
Jesus is going to come and plead with them.
Yeah, plead with them and give them a more chance, right? But eventually they crucified him, and now that was it. Cut the tree down. Have you ever cut a fig tree down? If you cut a fig tree down and you watch afterwards, what happens eventually? They've got some new shoots coming up from the roots. This is interesting.
It's very hard to peel.
Yeah, a fig tree, especially, it will continue to grow if the water's there. It will shoot new shoots.
So the cutting down of the fig tree, was that when Stephen was stoned?
Stephen was stoned. That was the last opportunity.
So
Yeah.
how does 1948 come into it?
We'll follow that through very carefully now. That's the very issue here, because, and I just drew your attention to it now. Cut down the fig tree, but after a while it will shoot again.
So that what you meant by shoot in question 4? Is that
Ah.
pretty much shoot?
Yeah, the tree shoots again, all right? It comes up again, okay? So let's go to question 4. Did the Jewish nation and other insignificant nations shoot to indicate the generation Jesus was referring to, right? So now the issue here is Israel was not a nation for a long time. She was being persecuted. She was all over the place. Now, as Brother Darrell has already pointed out to us, that note, incidentally, pardon this, the glitch that took place in the printing of this, something happened there, and that's just ignore that. You know, the second half of the years, that's just a glitch.
Which bit?
So you can see it there under question 4. You've got this interference there. That was a
Second half, please,
technological
just ignore that.
interference, yeah. And that happened to several times in this lesson.
Okay.
Just ignore that. The point here is that we are looking at the the nations that had not been nations, but they developed into nations. Israel was one of them. And the other nations in the same period, after the Second World War, certain nations began to gather strength as nations. Do you have any memory of history of those nations that were not nations but then became nations? At the similar period of time as the Jewish people started to become a nation. Have a look at India. Have a look at all the African states.
South African.
Right? When did they receive nationhood? If you know your history, in the nationhood of these were all over the similar period of time as Israel receiving its nationhood after the Second World War. The colonies became nations. African colonies became nations. They started gathering armies together and became, a nation. And so India became a nation in the same period of time, 1948. And so if you study that history, you can see, yes, the trees are all shooting, because the parable representation of trees and our nations, and the fig tree is the Israeli nation. You can see the picture there. Yes, Brother Darrell?
Question 4 is not talking about that. Question 4 with Joel 1, 6 and 7 and Joel chapter 3 verse 19 is talking about Joel's preaching to ancient Israel about a nation that was coming on them to destroy them. And he uses the locust as the reality before they receive that destruction, that the locust will come and chew everything up.
Right.
So that there's neither tree nor grass nor vine left in the land. But that's nothing of what's going to happen if they don't repent. And what was going to happen when they didn't repent was the fact that the Assyrian nation, which was coming to prominence, was going to come down under Nebuchadnezzar and absolutely
That's
wipe
right.
them out, and neither regard wife, son, daughter, child, going to slaughter the lot, strip them naked, put them in chains, and
Right.
march them back to Babylon.
Right.
That's
Now,
what Joel's about.
well, Joel there in 1, 6 and 7 talks about that, correct? And that identifies that, what does it say? The lion lays bare the vine and the fig tree. So we've just got a verification there that the laying bare of the fig tree was laying bare of the Jewish nation. That's where that came in. But then chapter 3, verse 9 to 13, where it says, let the weak say, I am strong, and gather for war. Now, if you study that one carefully, 9 to 13, that there is a representation of the weak nations in the time of the period of latter rain and so on, because Joel chapter 3 is talking about the latter rain there, etc., etc. And during that period of time, let the weak say, I am strong.
That to me, to what Sister White's describing, no, I never got another job. I got more out of verse 14 to 17, because it talks about the multitudes of the burden of decision. For the day of the Lord is near, the burden of decision. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. Like that, those three verses to me talk more about what's being described in the previous verses.
True.
Those verses to me just didn't get at a war. Jews have always been at war.
Of course. But the point is, we're talking here about what Jesus said. Let the nations shoot again. Let the weak say, I am strong. That was the importance of highlighting that particular scripture. Say, let the weak. These are weak. They weren't nations. They were weak colonies. Now they are saying, this is now the time period in which the trees are shooting. That was the purpose of identifying chapter 3, verse 9 to 13, having identified what Brother Darrell pointed out there, that was the Assyrian nation, Babylon, coming and destroying Jerusalem, laying bare the fig tree. So we're identifying clearly the nation is identified as Israel, but then now we come to the other text and we see that these weak nations, these weak colonies, say, now I'm strong, and they gather for war. Now, why is that important? Because war has, as you just said, war has been all the way along. But now we are looking at the last time where people are gathering, nations are gathering for the harvest. Nations are shooting for the harvest. And we're trying to understand the harvest that Jesus was talking about. So let's follow this through very carefully. Right there, in the 1800s, we saw there in the note under question 4, the Jews throughout the world, a Jewish nation in Palestine, seemed to best escape from the religious persecution. And there she describes, and she doesn't describe, this is the World Encyclopedia. They recognized that right there, back there in 1800s, the nation of Israel was beginning, the fig tree was beginning to develop shoots. Right back there. That's the issue here. And let's go to question 5. As Jesus connected the time of his coming with the season of summertime, does prophecy identify a time for this in world history?
Yes, and I don't understand. Yes, 2,300 days or years, but can you clarify later on? So Daniel 8:14 said, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And I just need a little clarification with that 2,300 days or years. Where it starts, when it's finished.
Right. That this is for people who already know this. So, 1844 came. The 2,300 days commenced in 457 BC. When the whole study of that in Daniel, he actually goes there into the detail how in 457 BC the Jews received their land again. Right? 457 by Artaxerxes' decree. So there was a decree made. There were 3 decrees, but they all culminated to 457, and that's the beginning of the 2,300 days, and it went right through to 1844.
So is that the harvest time or the time of the end?
Now, this is the point now, because we're trying to discover in the reading of the scriptures here, because you've got Genesis 8:22. Because what we're looking for here is the season of summertime that Jesus mentioned. We mustn't lose track of what he said. When the summer is nigh, you know the trees are shooting, right? So now we're looking at the time appointed when the summertime is to come into, and what is that so you've got Genesis 8:22, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest shall not cease. So seed time and harvest was something that happens regularly. We know that when it comes to harvest, it's the summertime. Harvest is the summertime. And let somebody read Jeremiah 5:24.
Neither say they in their heart, let us now fear the Lord our God, that giveth rain both the former and the latter. In his season he reserveth unto us the appointed weeks of the harvest.
Now, did you notice there, with our knowledge of the former and latter rain, it's to do with the coming of the harvest. Ultimately, after the latter rain, then there's to be the harvest, right? So the harvest has to do with the with something important for the last days, and we want to go into that in some more scriptures. But looking at the top of the page of page 5, it is through his power that summer and winter, seedtime and harvest, day and night follow each other in the regular succession. It is by the word that vegetation flourishes, the leaves appear, the flowers bloom, every good thing we have, each ray of sunshine and showers of rain, every morsel of food, every moment of life is a gift of love. Now, coming to the next statement, the history of the great conflict between good and evil, from the time it first began in heaven to the final overthrow of rebellion and the total eradication of sin, is also a demonstration of God's unchanging love. So the illustration of summertime after the winter and the conflict between good and evil coming to its fruition, as Sister White just identified there, is on par. It's connected, right? She says it's by the word of God that vegetation flourishes, that leaves appear, etc., etc. Every good thing we have, each ray of sunshine and shower of rain, every morsel of food, every moment of life is the gift of his love. And then she directly connects that with the conflict between good and evil in the next paragraph. You got that there? The history of the great conflict between good and evil from the time it first began in heaven to the final overthrow of rebellion and the total eradication of sin is also a demonstration of the unchanging love of God. She's just drawn a lesson from seedtime and harvest to the connection of God's care of dealing with the final scenes of overcoming and conquering evil.
So
Now,
this time that's identified in the world history.
yes.
So what is the time identified? So it can't be from beginning to the end, because it's identifying a time within that frame. So what is the time that's identified? So it must be a specific time within heaven, conflict in heaven,
Right.
to the final eradication. Can't be the whole lot.
Let's not forget what Jesus said. That's what we're following through. He is saying, when the trees shoot, you know that summer is near and the harvest is ready.
So is that the time that's identified in history? So it's after the 2,300 process.
That's it. Exactly the point. Yeah, that's it. That's the point that we are carefully picking apart, unpacking all these scriptures and looking at all the statements of Sister White, how it points us to the harvest of this world's history. Get the picture now? It's coming. Question 6. Seeing that summertime for this earth was appointed in 1844, what would we expect by 1948 as to its concluding harvest? Now, there's the point. Summertime is the harvest time. The concluding harvest. Okay, Joel 3:19. What did we read there? That was already touched on in question 4. Because all these nations are shooting, what are these nations going to be doing? What are they going to be doing? They always want to fight, don't they? Let the weak say, I'm strong. We are now a nation with armies. That's the issue here. And so, you know, just in your memory, the fourth angel's, the third angel's message came in time because there was a threatening of in 1848, there was a threat of a European war. There was already the beginning of a threat of the harvest. But the angel says, hold, don't let it go yet, right? Okay, so here we're looking at question 6, that the time appointed, remember 2,300 days, it said there, at the time appointed the end shall be. Did you pick that up? At the time appointed the end shall be. So the end of, and the harvest time, the end of the world is the time appointed in 1844, when the time shall be. So, there it started. The harvest time began in 1844.
So it's time of year.
The time of the end is the harvest time. Remember what we read there before, that 1755, the earthquake, the falling, the dark day, the falling of the stars. These were heralding the end of the world. These were heralding the time appointed when the end shall be. You can see how all those texts come together. Yes, Brother Dal.
So was 1844 then the beginning of the judgment for the Great Multitude?
That's right. This was the period of the judgment where, and it covers, the whole period of the judgment covers all sorts of events. Personal investigation and the closing of this world's events from 1844 onwards. And that's the introduction to this whole lesson, that we are studying and understanding where does this all apply. The summertime and harvest time starts in 1844.
So therefore we can go to 1844 is the former rain, and then we go to 1948 as the latter rain? That subject of the former and the latter rain is a deep study on its own, because Sister White says in 1888 the latter rain began, 1888, when that message of Christ's righteousness was first presented. So that's the former and the latter rain were all in the period of 1844 through to the First World War. And this is what we're looking at in the concluding part of this lesson. Due to the, and what was it there in Joel 3:19? What did we read there? What was the language?
Are they be desolate because they're shedding innocent blood?
The shedding of blood. The weak say, I'm strong, and there's the shedding of blood taking place. Now, follow this through very carefully now, because we come through to 1948. What happened from 1844 to 1948? What happened? Right? Revelation 11:18. Indeed, nations are angry. Nations are angry. Ever since 1844, ever since that time, nations are angry. What do we see according to Sister White's writings there?
War, bloodshed, irritation, want, famine, and pestilence were abroad in the land.
Right.
And these things surrounds God's people. They began to press together.
So there she sees, she identifies bloodshed, privation, famine, pestilence. And as you read to the bottom of that, self-dignity no longer controlled, deep humility took place, suffering, perplexity, privation caused reason to resume its throne, and the passionate and unreasonable man became sane and acted with discretion and wisdom. So that was a war she was watching. And then on the top of page 6, my attention was then called from the scene. There seemed to be a little time of peace. Once more, the inhabitants of the earth were presented before me, and again everything was in utmost confusion. Strife, war, bloodshed, with famine, pestilence raged everywhere. Other nations were engaged in this war and confusion. War caused famine. Want and bloodshed caused pestilence. And then men's hearts failed them for fear and looking for those things which are coming on the earth. Did you pick up what Sister White was describing here?
What the world wars?
The First World War and a little time of peace? And then the Second World War. That's the actual description here of the First World War with its pestilence. And you know back there, they had the pestilence after the war. They had the polio. They had the terrible, the Spanish flu. That happened after the First World War. And then there was a little time of peace, and then came the Second World War. That's what Sister White's describing here. So can you see the harvest is already taking, and all the terrible events of the harvest, the nations fighting and so on, these are all part of the harvest time. Right? Now, so what danger faces the generation living since 1948? Because 1948 was after 1945, the Second World War.
Did you say the wars were part of the harvest?
Of course, because the harvest is the end of the world.
Right.
You see, don't forget what all these things are that we've studied before, that we've just looked at before. The harvest is when nations are shooting and getting ready for the harvest of the destruction of the wicked. This is what Jesus is talking about. That's what I'm saying. We're trying to understand what Jesus is talking about. If you really understand what he's talking about, then you will go, oh, okay, what's he talking about? The nations are ready for harvest. And we're going to go into this harvest picture a bit more, looking at question 7. What danger faces the generation living since 1948? And what does it indicate in reference to the passing of generations during Earth's summer season? So Jesus had just said, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Don't forget that point. So he says in verse 42 to 44, what are we to do? What are you supposed to be doing now? Watch. And as you read the note under question 7, what is the problem with the generation after 1948?
Disappointment coming. So they disappointed after the first coming, nothing happened. Second, nothing happened.
Yeah. Oh, well. And aren't you hearing it? Aren't you hearing it? I mean, you've told me that before, how Seventh-day Adventist ministers are preparing for
preparing for their retirement.
time.
All that. And that's a great danger. I think it's in everyday life. If it doesn't happen what we want to happen, then we like, oh, look, whatever. Then the next generation, because we expect it didn't happen, we can't teach the next generation.
That's it.
Oh, well, it might happen.
See the effect it has on you? It has that effect. Right? And this is what Jesus is warning against here. Look, watch. Because what are you to be watching for? Now, people pick it up, oh, the coming of Jesus. But follow carefully, because next week we're going into some more detail on that as well. Because they're now weary. Oh, it's going to pass again. And look at that. Look at John Thiel. He said he expected Jesus to come when he was younger. And so the young people say, well, can you see the effect on the mind? We've been waiting, and nothing has happened. But yes, it is. Lots has happened. We don't realise the First World War has happened. The Second World War has happened. And after that, what did we read? Men's hearts failing them for fear. That's what's happening around us right now.
Because we want him to come when we want him to come, not when he wants to come. And that's what the bit here that says the Lord intimates a delay before the morning finally dawns. So there's a delay.
Right.
To see who's going to be watching, who's going to be, like we said before, patient at the system, and who's going to flake away.
Now, there is a very important statement here, coming to question 8. When the summer harvest is ended, how do those living in that last generation express themselves as they discover their failure of watching? They discover their failure of watching. Now, the evil servant says in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. That was Matthew 24, 50 and 51, isn't it? And what, because he said, my Lord delayeth his coming, how will he get caught out? Yeah? There'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth because he's going to be caught out. He hasn't been watching. He's been expecting much further time yet.
I'll
Now-
look up this word gnashing of teeth, because I never quite understood gnashing of teeth. And I thought grinding, or I thought you can grind teeth for various reasons, but it actually refers to anger.
Yeah.
Doing it out of anger, so they've got to be angry and persecute those who have meditation.
Anger, and it also means anguish. Anguish of soul. We've missed out. Now, this is the issue of this study, because we've seen the nations getting strength. And look at what's happening in the Middle East. Look at the nations all fighting, and Israel as a nation, a tiny little nation. Look what it's stirring up over there. Yeah? All these things are all the signs after 1948. There's so much in this. Now, it says there that they're waiting for something and not watching. And then it's going to happen. And what is it written in Jeremiah 8:20? What will they recognize when it's too late? What's the language?
The harvest is past, the summer is ended,
And we
not saying.
are not saved.
I found it really funny, like talking about pastors and stuff in this church house. This is why it says that once this happens, the people will go back to the pastors and go, why didn't you tell us?
Right, exactly. Now, notice what was highlighted in this note. Did you pick it up in the note? Today, what is meant with the summer is past, the harvest is ended, and we are not. We expected to see Jesus coming. That's when the harvest is ended. When Jesus comes. But just jump across to page 13, and there we read a very short statement from Testimony, Volume 2, page 190, at the top of page 13, about 6 lines down. When Jesus says, watch that you will not be caught by surprise. What time is he referred to? Not the revelation of Christ in the clouds of heaven to find the people asleep. No, but to his return from his ministration in the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary, when he lays off his priestly attire and clothes himself with garments of vengeance. And when the mandate goes forth, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still, and he which is filthy, let him be filthy still, and he which is righteous, let him be righteous still, and he that is holy, let him be holy still. That's what you've got to watch for. That's it. That is going to catch them by surprise.
It's so funny because they still, and I've heard it a few times now, they preach that Jesus doesn't finish his work immediately he comes. And I've heard a lot of, like last year's Easter Camp conference, the key speaker, Lloyd, he's one of those providers who goes, oh, the Lord won't stop his work immediately he comes. And I'm like,
That's it.
second the work stops and it goes to probation, not when he comes.
That's it.
Stops. Is it a year before?
Can see exactly what we're studying here, right? Now, look at this. What is the cause of them saying, oh, the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved? Come back to under question 8. Today, Christ is looking with sadness upon those whose characters, see our study on the character, he must at last refuse to acknowledge. Inflated with self-sufficiency, they hope that it will be well with their souls. But at the last great day, the mirror of detection reveals to them the evil that their hearts have practiced and shows them at the same time the impossibility to reform. Yeah, we're coming to a close. The impossibility to reform. What's that? Every effort was made to bring them to repentance, but they refused to humble their hearts. Now the bitter lamentation is heard, the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and my soul is not saved. They've been waiting and looking for the future, and it's past.
So look at the present, and look at the future.
This is what is to weigh in upon us with what we've just studied on the preparation of our soul by character building, that we still have opportunity, but concentrate on character building, not on all the other guff around you. Right? This is the issue. And because there's, and look, I'm really perplexed about this, because there are many people that are coming to original Adventism who discover this is too much. I can't do it. Harvest is past. Summer's ended, and I'm not saved. That is what is very close now. Already, people are finding it too hard.
They're trying to rely on their own strength, they're not looking for Christ.
And the point is, even if they were looking to Christ, it's too much. It's too much. But there are still grains fallen on the ground that have to be picked up. And that's still now. The harvest isn't completely closed yet. We are still getting opportunity. And this is what this message is telling us. We've got to be very watchful. And our next lesson, as in the days of Noah, we're going into the depths of what Jesus is trying to get across to us in this last generation.
It's so sad because, like Sister White wrote, that their eyes were cast downwards.
Yes.
Not upwards, but downwards. And they've got to graze the earthly things that were unfaithful in watching, because he's so far away to them, because they don't understand.
That's it.
Can't hear it. They graze themselves because we need to live here. Now, even suffering, we need to live here.
Yeah.
You know, for the next 30 years. So I must have a beautiful big house and cars. And then I need to retire because I need to enjoy these things that I've worked so hard for. Yet it's all going to disappear and be destroyed. So what are you going to enjoy?
So here is the strong message that we're picking up as we go through this lesson entirely. We've introduced it now, and we're going to continue to go into the depths of it until Jesus' words to us become very clear. Shall we kneel together in prayer and make this a matter of prayer?